evening, and thank you for lending us your ears tonight. It's time for Mimi and Pico TV.
And welcome.
Okay, so we're diving into a source today that definitely catches your eye right away. It's got this opening line that feels, well, a little different. It's from a transcript of the YouTube video, and its very first words are actually that greeting we just used.
Good evening, and thank you for lending us your ears tonight. It's time for Mimi and Pico TV.
Right, so that's the source's intro, not ours, but it kind of sets the stage, doesn't it? For something maybe a bit unusual, perhaps fascinating.
Exactly. And the video title itself is quite something. It's in Japanese, but translates roughly to forbidden. IQ 210 genius Chris Langan explained. Afterlife, cosmic consciousness, existence of God. What is the CTMU theory that destroys common sense? Cognitive Theoretic Model of the Universe.
Wow, okay, so that title and the intro really frame the subject, Chris Langan, as someone, well, exceptional, an intellectual powerhouse.
Yeah, they really lean into that. The source highlights his reported IQ, saying it's somewhere between 195 and 210, which, as the source points out, is claimed to be higher than figures associated with Einstein or Stephen Hawking.
Right, so they're not just presenting a thinker, they're setting him up as this kind of super genius. Someone whose insights, the source suggests, come from this unique cognitive level, maybe allowing him to derive these shocking truths through pure logic.
And our goal today, drawing only from this transcript, is to unpack his big theory, the CTMU, the Cognitive Theoretic Model of the Universe.
Yeah, the source presents it as potentially mind-bending and profound.
Yeah.
A framework that tackles the really big questions, you know?
Yeah.
Like, what is reality? What's consciousness? Does God exist? What about an afterlife?
Questions science usually struggles with or leaves to philosophy or religion.
Exactly. So we want to explore how Langan's CTMU, as described in this source, approaches these fundamental mysteries. What's his perspective on existence itself?
Well, to really get the CTMU, the source emphasizes that understanding Langan's background is pretty important. It provides context for his unique viewpoint.
Okay, tell us about him.
He was born in 1952, apparently into quite difficult circumstances. The source mentions poverty in the U.S. and even experiencing abuse in his childhood.
That sounds incredibly tough.
Definitely. But despite all that, his intellectual gifts were, well, undeniable, even from a very, very young age. The source says he taught himself to read and write by age 3.
3?
Yeah, and was apparently reading advanced math and philosophy texts before he even started elementary school.
That's hard to even imagine. But I guess that kind of intellect could also be isolating, especially in school.
That's exactly what the source suggests. His thinking was just so far ahead of the curve, ahead of his peers, ahead of the standard curriculum, that he often felt misunderstood and out of place. Traditional schooling just didn't quite fit.
So did he go through the usual academic route? College, PhD?
He did enroll in college, but the source says he dropped out. Partly due to money issues, which given his background makes sense, but also because of this fundamental disconnect he felt with professors. It seems the standard academic environment just wasn't structured for his way of thinking, his depth of inquiry.
So instead of academia, he went a different way.
A very different way. The source mentions him working a series of manual labor jobs, things like construction, being a bouncer, even working as a cowboy.
Okay, that's definitely not the typical path for someone described as a genius.
Not at all. But here's the crucial part, according to the source. While he was doing this physical work, he was undertaking this incredibly intense, completely self-directed program of study.
On his own.
Entirely on his own, teaching himself advanced physics, complex mathematics, deep philosophy, linguistics. The source really emphasizes the breadth and depth of it, calling it pretty crazy and just way too intense for most people to even attempt.
And the source argues that this specific combination, the raw intellect, the tough upbringing, the self-study across all these fields outside of formal academia, this was actually key to him developing the CTMU.
That's the core argument presented. You see, traditional academia often gets very specialized, right? Physics over here, philosophy over there, theology somewhere else entirely.
Yeah, they don't always talk to each other.
Exactly. And science, while amazing at explaining the how of the physical world, often hits a wall with the big why questions. You know, consciousness, meaning the universe's origin. Those tend to fall into philosophy or religion's domain.
Which use different methods.
Right. The source suggests that because Langan integrated knowledge from logic, math, physics, philosophy, all through his own self-study, he could see connections across these boundaries. He wasn't constrained by those disciplinary silos.
Allowing him to build a unified theory, like CTMU, that tries to bridge those gaps.
Precisely. A theory that addresses the physical and metaphysical together, which is something modern specialized science often struggles with. The source really highlights his unique background as the fertile ground from which this very different kind of theory could emerge.
Okay, that context is really helpful. It paints a picture of someone thinking outside the usual boxes. So let's get into the theory itself. What's the absolute core idea of CTMU according to this source?
The biggest, most fundamental shift it proposes is about the nature of the universe itself. The source says Langan argues the universe isn't just, empty space with planets and stars scattered in it.
Okay, so what is it then?
It's described as a giant information processing system with consciousness.
Whoa, okay, so not just matter and energy, but information and consciousness.
Yes, it's not static, it's an active system. It's constantly, according to the theory, recognizing, designing, and evolving itself. Think less like a machine, more like a giant self-aware computation unfolding.
A conscious information system. So the most basic building block isn't an atom, it's a bit of information.
That's the radical claim. In the CTMU framework, as the source explains it, information is seen as more fundamental than matter or energy.
More fundamental.
Yes. Everything we perceive, rocks, water, stars, our bodies, is ultimately understood as information taking on a specific structure or form. It's like reality is made of data that organizes itself to appear as physical things. The source even brings up the matrix as an analogy here.
That's a mind bender. Does the source connect this idea to anything in, mainstream science? Because it sounds pretty out there.
It does try to ground it a bit. It mentions that even within physics, there's growing discussion about the role of information. It references research, like from Dr. Melvin Vopson at Portsmouth University, suggesting that digital information might even be considered a fifth state of matter.
A fifth state of matter, like solid, liquid, gas, plasma information.
Potentially, yeah. The idea that information has physical properties may be equivalent to mass and energy is being explored. Langan's theory just takes that concept much, much further, saying everything is fundamentally information at its core.
Okay. If the universe is this conscious information system, like a cosmic computer, such it does it have, like an operating system, a code it runs on?
Langan calls this the self-configuring, self-processing language. SCSPL for short.
Self-configuring. Self-processing language. Okay, that sounds complicated. Can we break that down? How does the source explain it simply?
Let's try an analogy the source sort of guides us towards. Think about a regular computer program. Humans write the code, right? The rules. And then the computer runs that code. The designer and the processor are separate.
Right.
Now imagine a program that could rewrite its own code while it was running. That's getting closer to SCSPL. The self-configuring part means the universe isn't bound by fixed external rules. It's constantly designing and refining its own internal logic, the laws of physics, math, the rules of reality itself.
So it makes up its own rules as it goes.
Kind of, yeah. And the self-processing part means it's simultaneously executing those rules. It's running the simulation of reality based on the logic it's defining in real time.
It's the programmer and the computer.
Exactly, both at the same time. So the SCSPL isn't a fixed language. It's dynamic, evolving. It describes all the possibilities and behaviors within the universe, and it generates them too. The source stresses this self-contained, self-generating aspect is what makes it fundamental.
Wow. Okay, so universe as a conscious computer running on self-writing code, that's already huge. But the source says there's a reason for all this activity, a purpose.
Yes. That brings us to what Langan calls the telic principle. Telic just means relating to a purpose or goal.
So the universe isn't just randomly computing, it's heading somewhere.
According to the CTMU, as presented here, yes. It's not random evolution. There's an inherent goal driving this constant self-configuration and processing.
And what is that ultimate goal?
The source states it clearly. The universe's ultimate purpose is complete self-recognition.
Self-recognition. The universe is trying to understand itself fully.
That's the idea. It's engaged in this fundamental process of figuring out what it is, what it's capable of, its own potential, its meaning.
How does something as vast as the universe recognize itself?
Yeah.
That sounds very human.
It does, but in this model, it's a cosmic process. The source explains it happens through the universe organizing itself into increasingly complex structures over vast timescales.
Like from simple particles to stars, planets, life.
Exactly. This evolution towards complexity creates systems like us that are capable of higher levels of information processing, awareness, and understanding. The universe basically creates the tools it needs to observe and comprehend itself.
So consciousness evolving is the universe's way of developing its own awareness.
That's the interpretation the source gives. And interestingly, it points out that this core idea, the universe starting from some fundamental consciousness or information and evolving towards self-awareness, actually echoes themes found in some ancient spiritual or philosophical traditions.
So Langan's logic arrives at similar conclusions to some older, maybe more intuitive ideas.
The source suggests that resonance, yeah. It shows how different paths might lead to similar views on ultimate reality.
Okay, this is where it gets really personal then. If the universe is aiming for self-recognition by creating complex information processing systems, well, how do we fit in? Where do humans come into this picture?
This is a crucial point in the CTMU, as described by the source. Human consciousness isn't just some random byproduct of brain chemistry. It plays an absolutely vital role.
Vital hell.
Our consciousness is seen as a primary tool, like a window or a mirror, maybe even a means through which the universe actually achieves its self-recognition.
Wait, so when I look at the stars or try to figure out a math problem or just perceive the world, that's the universe using me to perceive itself.
That's precisely the implication. We are, in this view, like localized points of self-awareness for the entire cosmic system. Our individual acts of perception, thinking, understanding, they're not just our experiences, they are part of the universe's grand project of becoming fully self-aware.
So my consciousness isn't just mine, it's also the universe looking out through my eyes.
In a fundamental sense, yes. That's how the source portrays Langan's idea. It gives our existence this incredible, profound meaning.
We're not just accidents then. We're participants in the universe's most fundamental purpose.
Absolutely. The source says CTMU offers a radical rethinking of humanity's place. We're not insignificant specks drifting meaninglessly. We are active, essential contributors to the universe's drive towards self-understanding. That inherently gives meaning to human life.
Okay, let's push that connection between us and the universe even deeper. The source talks about a concept that sounds, well, almost shocking. The mind-reality law. What on earth does that mean?
Yeah, this is one of the most challenging, most radical parts of the CTMU presented in the source. The mind-reality law essentially proposes that our mind, our consciousness, our perception isn't separate from reality. At the most fundamental level, they're the same thing, or at least inextricably linked.
So it's not mind observing reality.
No, it challenges that standard view, where reality is just out there, objective and solid, and our mind is like a camera passively recording it. Langan, according to the source, suggests the relationship is much more active, maybe even reversed or bidirectional.
How so? Bidirectional.
The idea is that our very act of perceiving, of being conscious, isn't just taking in information about a pre-existing reality. It actively participates in shaping or defining that reality as information.
Shaping reality. Does that mean reality isn't fully real until we look at it?
That's getting close to the implication. The source suggests that unperceived reality exists more like a bundle of possibilities, a realm of potential. It only collapses into the concrete, definite reality we experience through the act of conscious observation or recognition. The source even summarizes it with the provocative phrase, "Something not perceived doesn't exist." At least not in a fully realized form.
That sounds incredibly strange. Is there anything in science that even remotely hints at something like this?
This is where the source makes a very important connection: quantum mechanics.
Ah, the weird world of the very small.
Exactly. The source specifically points to experiments like the famous double-slit experiment as potential real-world evidence supporting this mind-reality link.
Okay, the double slit. It always melts my brain a little. Can you give the simple version how the source explains its relevance here?
Sure. So you fire tiny particles, like electrons, one by one, towards a barrier with two slits in it. Behind the barrier, there's a screen to detect where they land.
Okay.
Now, if you don't try to watch or measure which slit the electron goes through, they act like waves. They seem to go through both slits at once, interfere with themselves, and create this spread-out wave pattern on the screen behind.
Right, the interference pattern.
But here's the weird part. If you put a detector at the slits to see which one each electron actually goes through, the interference pattern vanishes completely. Suddenly, the electrons act like definite particles. They go through one slit or the other, not both, and you just get two distinct clumps on the screen.
It's like they know they're being watched.
That's the mystery. It's the observer effect. The very act of observing or measuring seems to change the outcome, change how reality behaves at that fundamental level.
And Langan sees this not just as a weird quantum quirk, but as evidence for his mind. reality idea.
Precisely. The source explains that Langan interprets this observer effect as a sign of the fundamental connection. Our consciousness, or perhaps the universe's self-recognition operating through observation at the quantum level, might be intrinsically involved in collapsing those possibilities into a definite state. It's not just watching the waves, it's potentially influencing their transformation into particles.
So we're not just audience members in the cosmic theater. We're actually on stage, influencing the plot.
That's the powerful implication the source highlights. It calls the universe a participatory universe. Our consciousness, our choices, our attention, they aren't passive. They play an active role in shaping how the universe unfolds, how future reality takes form. This gives us not just meaning, but as the source puts it, significant responsibility and potential.
If our consciousness influences reality, does this support ideas like positive thinking or manifestation that you hear about sometimes? Does CTMU give a basis for thoughts become things?
The source is careful here. It clarifies that Langan's theory, as presented, doesn't necessarily mean we have direct psychic powers or can just wish things into existence.
Okay, so no bending spoons of my mind.
Probably not directly, no. But the source suggests it does imply that our state of consciousness, our mindset, beliefs, emotions, significantly influences how we interpret and experience reality, and potentially indirectly influences events themselves.
How would that indirect influence work in this model?
Well, think about it. Our internal state, our thoughts and feelings clearly affect our choices and actions, right?
Sure. If I'm optimistic, I might try things I wouldn't if I were pessimistic.
Exactly. And since CTMU sees consciousness as interacting with the universe as an information system, our mental state isn't just locked inside our heads, it's a form of information contributing to the overall system. So the quality of that conscious information, positive, negative, focused, scattered, might hold more weight in shaping our experienced reality than we usually think. It could influence reality, maybe not magically, but through the fundamental interplay of consciousness as information and reality as information.
So our thoughts and feelings are active data points in the universal computer, influencing the simulation we experience.
That's a good way to think about it, based on the source's explanation. We're constantly exchanging information within the system, and our conscious state shapes those interactions, co-creating our reality.
Okay, so CTMU tackles physics, consciousness, reality. But the source says Langan also applies it to things usually handled by religion or philosophy, like God and the afterlife.
He does. He uses the same underlying logic, the universe, as a self-aware information system to address these ultimate questions.
How does he define God within this theory, according to the source? Is it the traditional idea?
No, the source is quite specific here. It's not the idea of a personal being, separate from the universe, who created everything. That's important.
So what is God in CTMU then?
God is identified with the universe's fundamental structure and process. It's the underlying logic, the inherent intelligence, the creativity, the self-organizing principle, and that core drive for self-recognition that is intrinsic to the universe.
So God isn't outside the universe. God is the universe's operating system and purpose.
That seems to be the essence of it. The universe itself possesses the properties we might associate with divinity, intelligence, creativity, purpose. It's less about a creator deity and more about the inherent divinity of the cosmic system itself.
Does the source connect this idea to any other thinkers?
Yes, it draws parallels. It mentions Einstein wanting to read God's mind by understanding physical laws, suggesting God is in the laws themselves. And it brings up Spinoza's pantheism, the idea that God and nature are identical. Langan's view seems to resonate with that tradition of seeing the divine woven into the fabric of reality.
Okay, and what about the big one, the afterlife? What happens when we die, according to this information-based universe?
This follows directly from the core idea that everything is information. The source presents Langan's conclusion as quite striking. Death is not the annihilation of consciousness.
Consciousness survives. How?
Because consciousness, like everything else, is fundamentally information. And the CTMU posits that information isn't easily destroyed. It's conserved within the system. So when the physical body, the temporary hardware, ceases to function, the information that constituted our consciousness, our memories, our experiences, that information persists.
Persists where, if not in the body?
It's said to remain within the universe's underlying informational structure, like data being saved, essentially. Langan refers to this realm where conscious information is preserved as the uncollective domain.
The uncollective domain. What's that like?
The source describes it as a higher dimensional reality, existing beyond our normal constraints of space and time. It's non-physical. The source even connects this idea to concepts like the zero-point field, discussed by researchers like Hiroshi Tasaka, this idea of a fundamental field holding all information. It shows this concept of a non-physical information repository isn't unique to Langan.
So it's not like a place like heaven or hell.
No, the source emphasizes it's more a state of conscious existence, a reality based purely on information, where maybe past, present, and future coexist. The source uses terms like higher dimensions, or compares it to 5D consciousness, hinting at a perception beyond our linear time.
What about ideas like reincarnation? Could that consciousness information take on a new form?
Based on the source, yes, that's seen as plausible within the CTMU. If consciousness is persistent information, it could potentially reconfigure and manifest again as a new subjective experience, a new life.
Is it like one soul living many lives in a row?
The source introduces something more complex, meta-simultaneity. It suggests that from this higher, timeless perspective, our different lives might not be strictly sequential. They might all exist simultaneously, like different facets of a larger whole, influencing each other across time.
Like chapters in a book, all existing at once, even though we read them one by one.
That's a decent analogy. Multiple lives or experiences could be part of one unified consciousness existing across this nonlinear realm. What we see as separate individuals might be interconnected parts of a larger entity from that higher viewpoint.
It's fascinating how Langan uses logic and information theory to explore these areas. God, afterlife, souls arriving at conclusions that echo spiritual ideas, but from a completely different starting point.
It really is. The source highlights how CTMU tries to provide a logical framework where science, philosophy, and even spirituality can potentially converge, seeing them all as aspects of this underlying information system.
Okay, let's tackle another huge philosophical puzzle. Free will. Do we have it, or is everything predetermined? The source says Langan has a clear and maybe optimistic take on this.
He does. According to the source, Langan strongly asserts that free will is real. The CTMU views the universe not as a clockwork machine running on fixed deterministic laws, but as this dynamic, self-processing system constantly generating new information and possibilities via SCSPL.
So the future isn't predetermined because the universe is always creating novelty.
Exactly. The future isn't a fixed destination. It's actively created through choices made within this landscape of potential. And crucially, human consciousness and our choices are presented as essential parts of this future creation process.
Our choices literally help write the universe's future.
That's the implication drawn by the source. It's a system where our decisions lead to branching realities. Free will isn't just a feeling we have. The source suggests Langan sees it as a necessary function for the universe to evolve and create itself.
How does that work? How do our choices influence things? The source mentioned meta-causality.
Right, meta-causality. Let's break that down. Normal causality is simple. Past causes lead to future effects. A pushes B pushes C forward in time.
The standard cause and effect.
Yes. Meta-causality, as the source explains it, adds a twist. It includes the idea that future possibilities or goals can exert an influence backwards on our present actions.
The future pulls the present. That sounds weird.
It is counterintuitive to our linear thinking, the source admits. But think about setting a goal. Having a vision for your future, wanting to become a doctor, say that future possibility influences your choices now. You study harder, take specific classes. That future goal is, in a sense, pulling your present actions towards it.
Okay, I see that in goal setting. So the universe's overall purpose, the Telic principle, acts like a giant future goal pulling the whole system.
That seems to be the idea. The universe is drawn towards its goal of self-recognition, and our individual choices, aligned with our own goals, which ideally contribute to the larger purpose, are part of the mechanism pulling reality towards certain futures. The source notes this is complex, challenging our usual time-bound thinking, but it aligns with how purposeful action works.
This definitely reinforces that we're not just puppets.
Far from it. We are active, responsible co-creators of the system. The source emphasizes that our thoughts, feelings, daily choices, they all matter. They are interactions within this vast information network, contributing to the collective reality that unfolds.
And this gives even ethical concepts real weight.
Yes. The source suggests that things like compassion, empathy, seeking understanding, these aren't just nice ideas. Within CTMU, they could be seen as theoretically beneficial actions. actions that contribute positively to the universe's goal of increasing complexity, coherence, and self-recognition. They become logically valuable within the system's own framework.
Whether you buy the whole theory or not, just contemplating it as the source presents it really offers a powerful way to think about living more consciously and purposefully.
So just to quickly recap the main areas we touched on from the source. Langan's unique background shaping his thought. The universe as this conscious, self-processing information system, its core purpose being complete self-recognition, our absolutely vital role as the means for that recognition, the mind-reality connection potentially evidenced by quantum mechanics, God as the universe's inherent structure and logic, the afterlife as consciousness persisting as information in a timeless domain, and finally, the reality of free will operating through meta-causality, where future goals shape the present.
It's quite a structure, a real attempt, as the source portrays it, to build a bridge between science, philosophy, and maybe even spirituality, offering one unified way to look at everything.
And the core message for you, the listener, that seems to come out of this theory is really quite empowering. Your consciousness, your understanding, your choices, they aren't insignificant side effects. They are potentially fundamental to how the universe itself operates and understands its own existence.
So this deep dive, using this source, really encourages you to look at the world, yourself, your place in it all, with potentially fresh eyes. It's a call to see the interconnectedness of everything, driven by information and consciousness.
It definitely gives you a lot to think about. And if reality truly is fundamentally information, and our consciousness interacts with and shapes that information,
then consider this provocative thought. What kind of intentional information, through your thoughts, feelings, actions, are you putting into the universal system today? And how might that contribution, however subtle, be playing a part in shaping the reality that you and all of us experience? Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration into Chris Langan's CTMU theory, as presented in our source material.
yes, delving into theories like this, even if complex, always reminds us just how much mystery remains about the nature of reality.
We hope it gave you plenty to ponder.
See you next time on Mimi and Pico TV.